Today's talk is really on INFJs and their social world. And so when we go out and we interact with people from our work and family, meet new people, or when you're starting a job in a new country or going to school in a new place, you're going to meet a lot of new people. And when you meet people of different types, more often than not, they will be of a different personality type from you. INFJs are typically only around 1% of the population. And as a result, most of the people, the other 99% of the population you interact with, will be people of other types. So the key in when you interact with in your work or in positions of leadership or responsibility, you're going to interact with people who think about the world and go about the world and go about their lives in a far different way from how you go about your life. And so today's topic is really to examine how we function as INFJs and how the rest of the world functions, and how we can learn to interact with people of different types better, and how we can create more harmony in our social environment, and learn how to relate to other people better, and how we can apply ourselves best in our work and in our relationships. So that being said, we will just talk about the four cognitive functions, main cognitive functions that an INFJ uses. I'm going to leave them up here. So the first one would be introverted intuition. And that's typically denoted by NI. And introverted intuition is a function that is our dominant function. So if we're looking on the scale, it would be kind of our strongest function, if it's a scale of strength. And how this works is basically we synthesize information from a lot of different sources. It's kind of passive in nature, and it pulls together information, experiences, data, theories, ideas, concepts, principles, and kind of fuses them all together. So it makes logically coherent sense. And it's convergent function, which means that, and I've used this illustration a number of times. It's like a funnel, and you get lots of ideas, and these ideas pour into this funnel, and you're always kind of converging until you get a singular theory that comes out from all your experiences or the data or the people you've talked to, everyone you've piece of information you've maybe read in the newspaper or in a book, or you've listened to something you listened on YouTube, or anything that makes sense, you throw it into this funnel and you get a theory about a concept or explanation of something that you've been working on. And when that happens, you're very happy because finally everything together makes sense, and it's kind of that light bulb moment. It's like suddenly, you may be having a shower and then, this thing, suddenly I know what this person meant when they said that, or I know what to do now, because it's kind of often indicated by a flash of lightning, a stroke of genius and inspiration, and that is something that is quite unique to INFJs. The second function would be extroverted feeling. Just denoted by FE, and this would be the second strongest function for an INFJ. And FE feeling is looking at social harmony, it's looking at shared values and principles, it's looking at keeping the status quo. So when an INFJ typically goes about their business and meets someone new, they were trying to find out common ground or common things in common, and be less inclined to share their individual opinion or view on something first, because they don't necessarily know what the other person believes about a certain issue. So whether it's politics, you support for a certain political candidate, it's not, even INFJ could go and go all out and share their political views about something without necessarily knowing what the other person's coming from. And they would like to find some common ground first before they know someone well enough in order to share how they feel about a certain situation. And so that's extroverted feeling. Is also linked to explanation, teaching, shared values, and kind of understanding what the feeling is of the room. Whether the room is, anxious, cold, warm, energetic, excited. And INFJ will be able to pick up on the feelings of the room very quickly and be able to understand what's intuitively what's going on at any given situation. The third one would be introverted thinking. That's denoted by TI, and that would be the third strongest function. Introverted thinking is looking at things from a logically consistent standpoint. It looks at a situation and it puts information into categories. And so when you receive new information, that new information will be judged against your existing information about a topic. So the topic, for example, may be MBTI theory. So you may have read a lot of things about MBTI theory, and you'll be trying to figure out whether anything you've read or heard is consistent with what you've heard before, whether what the person is saying or teaching is logically consistent. Logically consistent is TI, whether it's logically consistent with anything you've encountered before, and you're always questioning to find out what is the ultimate truth behind that topic. And we use TI as our third function when we're exploring a single topic. So we use our thinking function to explore new ideas. And these new ideas, these TI ideas, are invariably combined with NI ideas, which these two introverted functions. And these two NI plus TI helps to generate theories about everything. So, for example, MBTI is just one theory regarding understanding of human behavior. Another one which I've been talking about a lot was the Enneagram, and people also look at strength finders or maybe socionomics or big five. And so all these can be considered separate TI theories, and how NI works will be combining these theories together to get a universal understanding of human behavior, which you have when you combine all the TI separate topics together. But each of these separate topics are worth digging into itself. And INFJs, because TI is not the strongest function, INTPs, ISTPs, TI is the strongest function. They would explore a topic for a lot longer and a lot greater depth than INFJ will. Typically, we'll explore a topic and maybe get bored of it and explore another TI topic, and then another one and another one, and then combining those together because we want to figure out what the ultimate meaning of a certain area of interest we have, and whether that makes sense to us. So TI is there, it's a third function, it's not very strong. Can develop it, you can also use it a lot, but you would get bored using TI all the time because you would just want to make sense of, well, what does it all mean? And meaning typically comes from NI when you combine a lot of TI topics together. And the final function is Extroverted Sensing. This noted by SE. So that's a kind of a small bar for SE function. Extroverted Sensing is very much linked to being in the moment, about your five senses. What's happening here in the here and now? What's going on in my workplace? What's going on at home? What's happening now today? It's very much in the moment, very immediate. It's also linked to aesthetics and beauty. People with a strong preference for SE have a good eye for color, detail. Magazine covers are very eye-catching, very strong SE required for images, art, beauty. Also linked to food, tasting, something that tastes good, something exciting, energetic in the moment. It's all linked to SE. And SE is there, and then INFJ is our fourth function. It's kind of a bit passive. It can show up in sometimes quite extreme ways. If we spend too much time in our heads with the NI and TI, it can show up in ways which we may least expect. We get very stressed out, and when they're stressed out, you do things like maybe jump out of the aeroplane, do some skydiving, or maybe drink too much, or eat too much, or sleep too much. Maybe also tidy the house too much, because it's not a very strong function. It often shows up from time to time in a way that is we least expect. So these are the we equate these functions to left hand or right hand. Some of you have a right-handed, some of you are left-handed, and so this is kind of your dominant hand. and you feel more comfortable using these 4 functions as opposed to the other 4 functions where you'll be not as comfortable using them, and you will be a lot more find it unnatural. So I'm right-handed, so if I use the other 4 functions, it'll be by using my left hand, and I can train it. I can train it very well. I can train it so that I'm quite comfortable using it. I can learn to write my name with my left hand, but at the end of the day, I would revert to these 4 functions, and understanding how to use these well would be understanding how to use my right hand well. But at the same time, the other 4 functions cannot be ignored, and they're also described as kind of the least preferred functions or the shadow functions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these 4 functions too, because it's important when you interact with other people that you know that these people have a preference for using other functions that you are not as comfortable with, and you're not as natural with. And when you communicate with these people who use functions in a different order and a different way from you, that's when you get maybe your wires are crossed and you don't understand each other very well. And you really get frustrated because, why can't you see things from my point of view? Because that's how things make sense. That's how things make sense to me. But to the other person, things may make sense to them equally from their perspective because they are using the opposite functions. So we're going to just talk about the other 4 functions. So we have extroverted intuition. That's NE. This is is kind of a weak function. So extroverted intuition is a kind of a divergent function. It means it creates possibilities, new possibilities, and it bounces from one idea to the next. Whereas we use introverted intuition, which is kind of converging to one point. Extroverted intuition bounces around. So we use extroverted intuition. These people are great at brainstorming. They're great at coming up with new solutions and coming up with new options. And we will get kind of stuck in our hole quite a bit and may only keep analyzing and over-analyzing things. But people with extroverted intuition would not get stuck. They'll bounce out into the next topic and next topic. And they have a preference for more ideas rather than depth of ideas. So the next one would be introverted feeling. And SFI, again, is a very subconscious, weak function for us. Introverted feeling gives you a sense of your own values and principles and where you stand on a certain idea. And because for us it's pretty much subconscious, it's a 6th function, often as INFJs we don't know how we feel about a certain area. We don't know what our values are or certain opinions are on something. And we will look at kind of extroverted feeling as more of what the shared values and principles are, rather than taking a stand for individual values and principles. So people with extroverted feeling, as long as the external world reflects something that is congruent to their internal values, like I believe I should be vegan, for example. I believe that killing and slaughtering animals is cruel. I'm going to make sure that everything I do is going to adhere to my individual values and principles. I may believe that recycling is the only way to go, and I don't really care about what other people think about the area, but I'm going to recycle, and I'm going to do that regardless of what people think. And I'm also going to tell people that you must recycle, you must, must go vegan because that's the right thing to do. So it's very strong personal values and very strong opinions about something. Someone with a strong introverted feeling. People with strong that's paired with extroverted thinking is the next one. So extroverted thinking as opposed to introverted thinking, which is more of a kind of explores an idea and sees whether it's logically consistent from many different angles. And it can be a swirling mass of thought. As long as it's logically consistent, it's okay. As long as the lines are connected, it's okay. Extroverted thinking likes to define a problem by having very clear boundaries. So for example, the rule of law. If you throw chewing gum on the street or litter, you will get fined. So it's very clear boundaries for what will happen. If you break the law, you go speeding past a certain amount, you will get a ticket. So very clearly defined, if A happens, then B will happen. So extroverted thinking is linked to kind of a very closed set of principles. You define a problem. If a problem can be defined, then you can solve it. If you can't define the problem, then you can't solve the problem. Whereas TI looks to explore something from all angles and possibilities. As long as logically consistent, we can work with that. But TE needs to know exactly where are the boundaries of the problem and how exactly are we going to structure those boundaries. So TE is very much listened in business, and used in business quite a bit, where you have, for example, like accounting and finance and legal issues, reporting, a very structured way of ordering your life, which as INFJs we have a preference for a little bit more unstructured and questioning things from a more philosophical standpoint. So that's how TE works, and the final one will be Introverted Sensing. That's a very weak function for us as well. So whereas extroverted sensing is linked to the here and now, introverted sensing is linked to maybe the past experiences, recall of feelings associated with a certain experience. If it happened in the past, it can happen again. Whereas SE is like, every moment is different. We can work with what we have now, as opposed to SI. If we want to solve something, whether it's following a particular recipe in a book, or whether it's setting up a studio or way, a work of art in exactly the same way, SI looks to do things exactly the same as things has been done before. Whereas SE is like, maybe it doesn't need to be different. It can be new. It can be novel. SI is like, okay, you solved the problem today. How was it done before? Has anyone else done it this way? What happened in the past when this happened? You search your memory banks for experiences in the past, or if not your experiences, other people's experiences, or if what's happening in the economy today, has anything happened like that in the past? There is the U.S. economy predicated on what happens if the Chinese economy is growing in a certain amount, is necessarily going to follow the pattern of what happened to the U.S., for example? It's very much similar, looks at, if it happened before, it can happen again in that order. So these are the 8 functions, and in order to live a balanced life, in order to interact with people in your social world and in your relationships, who will invariably use these functions in a different order than an INFJ, unless you're obviously interacting with another INFJ, then you would need to learn how these 8 functions operate in your own life. You need a lot of introspection and figure out exactly which functions you're using and when you're using it, especially in the moment. If you're talking to someone, and you can also work out what functions they are using and how their emphasis on and their view of the world is different from yours. And in order to work better with people, in order to understand people better, you need to also be aware and to have that space in order to understand which of the functions you are using and which of the functions they are using. And then in that scenario, you can choose to use certain functions that may be your non-preferred functions, but may gel or work better with the other person, especially if you're in the area of, for example, business or finance. You'll be working with strong TE and SI people. You know how to use these functions to relate to that people better. Otherwise, when you interact with them, they will probably think you're from outer space or speaking another language or something too weird and abstract for them to follow. And I would like to add at the same time that NI is a dominant function for INFJs and INTJs. And INFJs are around 1% of population, as I said. INTJs are around 2% of 1 to 2% of population. So as a whole, it's basically around 2 to 3% of the population. We use NI as a dominant function, which is why a lot of INFJs find it so hard to show up in the world. And I also did a talk on that, about why INFJs find it so hard to show up in the world. It's because NI, being a very abstract function, is not easily understood by the rest of the world. And you try explaining to someone your complex theories and ideas, you probably get a blank look, and they would have no idea and lose patience, and they'll think you're really weird, and you shut this down in most of the world. Whereas if, for example, SI is a dominant function for INSTJs and ISFJs. And ISTJs around 16% of men, and ISFJs are 19% of women. So SI functions, let's call it around 30 to 35 of population, which is 1/3 of the population use SI as a dominant function. So think about that. What we see as our weakest function is being used by most of the world, well, let's say 1/3 of the world as the strongest function. So they find it really easy to get along with each other. They're able to communicate on a certain level. They're able to talk about the SI theories and facts and history and principles far more easily. And for us to adapt to that is not natural. It's why it's very hard when we talk to people of other types to be ourselves, because they are all talking one language, maybe an SI dominant language. And we can't bring in NI theories because they're too complex for them. They would be the flip side. NI would be their weakest function. So you overload them with concepts and theories, they're just not going to get it. And you have to learn to bring out SI theories. And another one, TE, is one of the top functions, is also around. It's probably at least 10% of the population use TE as a dominant, ENTJs and ESTJs. And so TE dominant people found a lot in government and business are going to be using their function quite happily, and they have lots and lots of other people who use it. So they're quite natural and they're quite comfortable in the world. Whereas for us to use TE, that's pretty difficult as a whole, because it's not something we would explore, but we probably had to train it and develop it, and in a way that we can get along with others. So I mean, as you can see, the world is not really set up for an INFJ or dominate to make it easy for an INFJ to function, because the world is run by a lot of SI people, and we are living in the structure they've created. A lot of government structures are created by SI dominant or SI secondary people, and we don't fit into government, schools, businesses that well, because you have to learn how to use these functions. And if you have learned to use it very well, I was in investment banking for over 10 years, and I learned a lot to interact with a lot of these people. And at some point, you might realize this is not really you. Using these functions is not really you. I have to use what's natural to me. But if I'm using what's natural to me, no one really understands what I'm talking about. So the idea for you is to kind of understand what your dominant functions are and how you're going to use them best in the world. At the same time, learn how to master some of your weaker functions so you can interact with others, but not in a way that causes you to lose your dominance and your niche and your area of expertise and what feels most comfortable to you. So those are the 8 functions. So I'd just like to add also that why this theory is very important is that it helps you understand why you're so different to others, and then once you understand your own behavior, you can see how you are working under different circumstances and how you behave under stress. And when you're under stress, it's also worth noting that you would use maybe the functions in the opposite order, and they come out a bit wrong. So you may realize you're using SE and TI, maybe very much in the moment, or as I mentioned, maybe doing extreme sports, overeating or over drinking, or focusing on sensing world too much. Then you can realize, I'm under a lot of stress and I need to rebalance myself, and I need to spend some more time to develop my more introverted function. Okay, so one thing I'd also like to talk about is kind of in the workplace, and how does this apply in the workplace. So as I mentioned, I used to work in investment banking for about 10 years, and there was a lot of different social events which I had to attend, and if not company meetings, there was a lot of meeting of brokers and clients, or meetings with other investors. And as a result, I had to use all these functions in a different way. There's a lot of extroverting, there's a lot of going out, there's a lot of team dinners, there's a lot of events which I had to do in order to, as a job requirement, I just needed to do it. And something which I won't talk about too much today is also the Enneagram and how, social instinct being my dominant instinct, it was kind of quite easy to do. But over time, got quite tiring because there's a lot of extroverting going on, and I was using a lot of functions like TE and SI, especially, which on a daily basis, which eventually got me burnt out. So at this point in time, I'd like you to think a bit about your own work and your own way in which you are operating on a daily basis. And we're just going to use this time to break into our first of our small breakout groups. I have a few discussion questions to look at. Okay, welcome back, everyone. How's your small group discussions? And learn anything interesting from each other? Okay, so basically we're just going to circle up. I'm just going to go around each of the groups in turn, and you just share with me some of the highlights of your discussion together. So, I mean, we looked at three questions. Now, what people or types do you find most difficulty dealing with? And how do you find yourself adapting to others? And the third question was, what are the social expectations of your work and how do you find them? Yeah, I think, the ES types. So the ES types would be the ESTPs and the ES, in fact, a lot, TJ, ESFJ, and ES, all the extroverted sensing types, they would use a mixture of FE dominant or SE dominant, and they would use that as their major function. And it means a lot of times they will be either talking a lot. Actually, they will use all of them. ESTJ will use TE, ESFJ will use FE, ESTP will use SE, and what's the other one? ESFP will use SE. Is any they don't use? They don't use any, but they use FE, SE, or TE, all the ES types, and that would make it a lot more challenging, I guess, because they're always out there doing something. And then may you also say the ST types. So the ST types would use a mixture of TE and FE. I think the challenges, what was the main challenges you said was?
They're not open for diversity.
Yeah, so if you're saying there's something which, looking at more their experiences and lack of diversity, I think the common theme with the ES types and the ST types, what you will notice that NI would be pretty low down for their functional stack, which means that the conversations we would like to discuss, or the things that make us most alive, would be pretty low priority for them. So we can't use our dominant function with them. They won't understand it as much. And like ES and ST, sensing would be sensing dominant, so they're not intuitive, they're not ideas people, and we're dominant, deep idea people, and we can't even share a new idea to them without them feeling a little bit uncomfortable. They would be very much of a challenge for us to relate to people who don't share our top two functions. Okay, that's very good. Anything else from that group? Or no? Okay. How about Kevin, your group? Same. Any express. So it's all the E's. So I'm just going to write here. So the ones that maybe ES, ST, E's. Any? How about the second or third question? How do you find yourself adapting to others or the social expectations? Anything of note come up? So by switching off NI, you stay at the surface and you don't go deep, and you start to talk about more sensing things like how was your day and what do you eat, and okay, what's the weather like? Okay. Okay. Majority don't use NI as much. Okay, that's good. Okay. So you're still in the exploratory stage, as you said, you're exploring stuff, but then they will conclude too quickly. And then while you're trying to go deep and explore things, they know they cut it off there. There's enough already. I would think which of the types would do that. A lot of the J types. Yeah, the J types, ISTJ, ISFJ. ESTJ, ESFJ, the ones, the E's. The N's typically are okay talking about ideas, or the N types, but N types are only 25% to 30% of the population. So the S is around 70%, 75%. So most of the world are S's, and they won't get it. So the other 8 intuitives. Yeah, so it is quite hard to find a sparring partner for conversation topics who can. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, someone who's a die-hard vegan who wants you to eat vegan food will be imposing their FI values on the whole world, but being FE, you still want to be close to your friend and not upset them. So you may want to go along to the vegan restaurant, but still feel very upset and frustrated. So that would be other people. FI users would be quite challenging. Strong FI, or any FI users. Okay, so the big picture would be the NI, and people who are strong NI users and maybe NE users have a very big picture. So those will account for around 10 to 15% of the population. The rest of the people you would see as, to an INFJ anyway, would see the rest as not big picture people. Should be around 80 to 90% of the people you deal with. Not big picture people, because their intuition would be not as developed as yours. It wouldn't be as strong a function. So. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second topic for this evening. So the second topic for this evening is about meeting new people, and after all this, a lot of you came here to meet new people. I mean, generally I found meeting new people, and INFJs have a small circle of friends, and we're quite happy to have a few people which are best friends, which you trust very well, you can share stuff with. It doesn't need to be a large circle of people, and these small groups are often enough for us to survive. But having said that, getting those handful of people into your circle is sometimes quite difficult. And when you enter a new city, start a new job, move to a new country, and so on, initiating new relationships are sometimes necessary. Especially also in the areas of when you're out dating or finding a partner, or that's also. You have to come out and meet new people in that space. So we're going to explore this topic quite a bit more, the area of meeting new people. And we have also some other discussions a discussion group we can get into to talk about, us as INFJs meeting new people and some of the challenges we face, and perhaps some of the things we can talk about that can help us in this area. So we're going to switch up the groups a little bit. Okay, how do you guys get on? Interesting. Couldn't pull you back together just now. So we're just going to also have a kind of popcorn thing. So if you have any ideas you want to share, just open up to everyone on some of these topics about meeting two people. We can just share with the group what you discussed with your small group and whether any insights for us. So the first question was, what are some of the challenges you face when meeting new people? The second one is, how easy is it for you to make the first move when meeting someone new? And did you or the other person initiate first? Is the relationship one of your choosing? And the third question was, what are some commonalities you look for when meeting someone new? So if you want to share anything from your small group about any of these? Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, FE, as I mentioned earlier, likes to seek harmony, common interests, books, reading, topics, common ground first when in a new relationship, especially because you don't know where the other person is coming from. Okay, that's great. For the last topic for the evening, we're just going to talk about our INFJ social group itself. So I'm going to give you, I talked about how we've been meeting together for about a couple of years now, and we've gone through a whole range of different topics. And this is also, maybe if some of you have discovered, this is also a place where INFJs can have a unique kind of group. We can come together and share ideas and different topics, as well as having some similar interests to each other. So in the past we've done things like maybe an art meeting, or a few of us go for different talks together, or different even being lost in an escape room and seeing whether 5 INFJs can escape from an escape room. Well, in case you're wondering, it didn't work. Our types were too similar.
It didn't. We are a bit lost.
Yeah, we're lost. But we want to come back and do it again. Maybe with more next time. So, we have all these ideas planned for the next months or next years or so. So we're just going to get into a small group just to discuss some of the possibilities we can have as a social group of our own, which is different from any other social group there is out there on Meetup. So we're just going to get to small groups again and discuss 3 questions. Is why did you join this INFJ group tonight? Secondly, how can the INFJ community here in Singapore help you in your own personal growth and development? And 3, what ideas do you have for future INFJ events? And do you have any areas of interest or expertise you can share with the group? Whether it's art, books, teaching, area. I mean, INFJs are we've discovered are in all kinds of industries, all kinds of careers. We ran a careers workshop and we had feedback from over 15 of us, and none of us were in the same career. So we're all in very diverse careers. So if you have any area of interest or expertise from your own background, which you can perhaps contribute to the group, we can discuss that and maybe share with us, so we can have an idea on how this social dynamics can work going forward. There will also be a chance for you to get to know some of the people which you haven't met yet tonight. So you're going to get into 3 small groups again and pick a group which is different from the one you went with. So I think we have some of the good ideas. We're going to write them down for future reference.
Like if somebody started a new interest or hobby, like maybe you can share experience.
So hobby.
Netball, then everyone can talk about netball.
So hobby, sharing hobby experiences would be one of them.
Music, like I started listening to J Cho. Started listening to 2 Steps from Hell. So you can maybe start
Right.
discussion on that genre.
Okay, so if someone started like skydiving or something,
then you can guys
they can share about what it was like.
to Australia.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So music, dance, just a sharing, right? Okay.
Or like Ace Chess.
Okay. So intuitive games like board games, intuitive. Well, that's a good.
Taboo, code names.
Okay.
We organize the games and
I just go out to play.
So how about areas? So areas of expertise would be merged with the ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like they join the group to feel validated, that we're not just alone after all. So we share like common similarities and challenges across the board, and when we share stories to each other, it's like a support ecosystem. We can relate to each other pretty well. Unlike if you go to maybe another kind of friendship group, then everybody sometimes maybe couldn't relate to you and just put you down when you needed some answers or needed to share. Like it's really a more open group. So
it's an open sharing group.
open sharing,
So it's open. Why did you join the INFJ group? Open sharing group.
and just wanting to feel like we're not alone.
Validated. Validation. Okay. How about any of the second or third questions? How the INFJ community can help your personal growth and development.
Belief and value system in us,
Right.
and we can grow together.
So meet people with same values. Values and grow together. Okay, that's a good one. Okay. Okay. And how about what ideas do you guys come up with?
Screening, then study.
Oh yes, that's right. It's movie studying. So, so studying movies. So there's an idea to study movies and analyze characters and discuss them at the end. Quite a depth analysis workshop. You were talking about the reasons for joining the group. You had some good ideas. Perhaps.
So before I join the group, I feel like I'm weird, the weird one. So I need to fix into other
So,
people.
not weird.
So after I come here, then I realize it's okay.
Weird.
Yeah, because you're just as weird as you.
So I'm comfortable with my own self now after coming to this group. So that's why I keep coming home.
So more comfortable with self. Okay. So how to approach other personalities? Oh, I think that was it, right? Okay. So thanks. We have plenty of good ideas here. Well done on the NE. Creating new possibilities. Okay, so basically, well, I was going to leave it here tonight. I hope you've at least understand a little bit more about yourself, about those cognitive functions, about how you can relate to others. I know it's just a little skim along the surface, and we can actually talk about it more in detail. And I think in my group as well, we're discussing about if everyone knew the specific types they struggled with, I could talk a lot more in detail. You know, for example, ESFJ, how they actually operate and how you to get along with them better, or INTJ types, and how actually to deal with them. But again, that obviously depends. Everyone here has a different level of knowledge in MBTI theory, and some of you are more familiar with cognitive functions than others. So we just kind of have a brief overview today. Hopefully all of you have been able to follow it. I haven't also talked about Enneagram type theory, which is I also run other meetups on those, and that also affects relationships on a much deeper level, and the theory is also very deep and it'll take time to explore, but those actually work very well in meeting new people in social events. But again, a lot of you are still new to Enneagram, so you're still exploring the Enneagram. So I encourage you both to develop your understanding of MBTI theory and to dig into the Enneagram more if you have time. It's a lot more complicated than MBTI. And you can also explore how your specific Enneagram type and subtype, of which there are about 108, as to which one you are. So yeah, again, I'm going to wrap up for today. Thank you all for coming.